Only one barrier remains between Horus and the solar system. For thousands of years, the Garmon cluster served as a gateway to the cradle of humanity, and now its grandest trial lay before it. Loyalist forces rally from the entire galaxy in a desperate effort to bolster the last line of defense. War on such a scale will not be decided by humans or even space marines, but by thousands of titans and cunning primarchs. Welcome to our series on Warhammer 40k and the Horus Heresy, explaining the origins of the Imperium and Chaos. In this 12th video, we will explore the breach of the Ruin Storm and the Beta Garmon plotline. No doubt this will all be fuel for your own plotlines in universes near and far, and if you're going to be playing those out on the tabletop, we've got a deal for you from our sponsor Chepeku, who bring you their complete fantasy bundle. This is a chance for discounted access to Chepeku's massive library of tabletop fantasy gaming assets. It comes in 3 collections: maps, scenes, and tokens. The stunning maps can be used as static images, but also feature animation and sounds when used in virtual tabletop programs, all of which work with Chepeku assets. There are more than 6,000 maps in the archive already, including sci-fi maps by the way, so it's not only medieval-style fantasy Chepeku can help you with. The Scenes collection features backdrops to spice up gameplay events, with variations for different times, moods, or themes. Again, there are thousands to explore in there already. Tokens are a new system for easily portraying NPCs, monsters, or any actor in the world. There are loads of presets to use, you can customize them, or even generate tokens randomly for novel throwaway enemies and such. Every month, Chepeku adds 5 new maps, 5 new scenes, and more than 40 new tokens to these 3 already massive catalogues. They are normally sold separately, but now with their complete fantasy bundle offer, you need only pay for 2 to get all 3. It's also much cheaper than their previous Patreon subscription method, so even if you've tried Chepeku before, now's the perfect time for an update. Learn more and sign up at go.chepeku.com/wizards_warriors, link in the description. After the trial of Conrad Kurz, the Imperium Secundus was disbanded. Thereafter, its armies gathered in order to reach Terra with utmost haste. Garrisons and patrols were recalled, as every single man was needed. With Pharos weakened and damaged, finding an escape route off of Ultramar bordered on the impossible. To find the way out as fast as possible, the army split apart, with Lion using his Xeno device to break through. Even then, it took weeks to navigate out of the cradle of the Ruin Storm. The Ultramarines decided to make short, uncalculated warp jumps, hoping to eventually escape. Instead, they fell into an ambush of Word-Bearers, World-Eaters, and Night Lords. After a costly space battle, the traitors were defeated. Among the prisoners were Chaos Navigators, who agreed to guide the Loyalists out of the Ultramar. The Blood Angels dove headfirst into the fiercest part of the Ruinstorm, hoping that the true path would be obstructed the most. Suffering from demon incursions all over the fleet, the Armada was stuck in an endless battle. During lengthy combat, the Red Tier spotted a Chaos warship close to them, and prompted the Legion to tail it. Sometime later, Sanguinius decided to translate out of the Imperium. To the surprise of all 3 Primarchs, they had all ended up in the same place, the Pandarex system. Chaos clearly had an ulterior motive, otherwise only the Dark Angels would have left Ultramar. Yet the only way was forward. Lion was chosen as a guide, and the combined fleet departed. Twice more Chaos tried to stop them, but twice it failed. At last they arrived at the border of the Ruinstorm, the Davin system. The Davin system was a graveyard of dreams. It was here that Horus had fallen, and with him, the bright future of the Imperium. All around lay destroyed ships, billions of human bones, and fragments of purged cities. These remains were but a fraction of hopeful futures ended by the Horus Heresy. The pure chaos had brought them all here to the symbolic altar of unmaking. All Primarchs, including the captive Conrad Kurz, descended to the surface to find that the planet was completely abandoned. The expedition ventured into the Temple of the Serpent, where Horus had been corrupted, and found that it too was empty. Conrad's prophetic abilities augured that nothing would happen here, but Sanguinius was not convinced. Angel's proclamation that he would alter his grim future stirred the unholy powers of the temple. A portal was summoned, through which Sanguinius stepped. Chaos showed Sanguinius the manifestation of his deepest desires, yet this future was far too perfect, and thus bordered on the unbelievable. Consequently, Sanguinius easily dispelled the illusion to reveal Madial, the demon of chaos undivided. Madial offered Sanguinius a deal. Sanguinius would be given power and opportunity to kill Horus, but only if he would bend the knee. Meanwhile, a Chaos fleet appeared in orbit over Davin. This fleet was composed of all the ships that had been lost in the Ruinstorm and boarded by demon hordes. It was led by Medaile's flagship, the bloated and enlarged cruiser called the Veritas Ferrum. The newly arrived armada matched the Loyalists. The fight was even, with each side suffering heavy casualties. Yet the demon infestation spread on every Loyalist ship that was destroyed. Superior tactics and skillful maneuvering were not enough to contain the ever-growing Chaos Armada. In an act of desperation, cyclonic torpedoes were fired. These were weapons designed to crack the planet's surface, yet Veritas Ferrum's bloated hull withstood the Exterminatus-grade impact. Sanguinius, who, after teleportation was on board, used the tremors made by the torpedoes to escape back onto Davin. As soon as he was back on Davin, the Primarch orders the bombardment of cyclonic torpedoes on the temple. Medaile tries to unsuccessfully pull Sanguinius back on the ship. Instead, a Blood Angel Space Marine held the demon in place halfway through the portal. All Loyalists, except for the heroic Blood Angels, evacuated off of the planet. The cyclonic torpedoes struck. Davin was destroyed, and the forces of planetary annihilation were transported through the portal onto the Veritas Ferrum. It is unclear what the true reason for the Chaos flagship's end was: colossal brute force or the symbolic destruction of Davin. Either way, the demonic armada was banished as soon as their leader died. With the destruction of Davin, a path out of the Ruinstorm was created. It was the first of many that were created after that day. The Ruinstorm started dissipating, and forces of the late Imperium Secundus began searching for a way to reach Terra, finding that the only path available would take them through traitor lines. The Triumvirate decided that one of them should rush to Terra, while the others would occupy the traitor forces. Thus, Lion volunteered to attack traitor homeworlds to lure the enemy out. Guilliman attacked blockades head-on and pinned them in place, while Sanguinius arrived on Terra, taking Konrad Curze with him. The Night Lord's Primarch had lost his faith in the inevitability of fate, and was ready to reconcile with his father. Sanguinius knew that the Emperor saw the Primarchs more as tools than sons, so there was a chance that Konrad would be forgiven. Not being able to stand this thought, he put Curze in stasis and vented his coffin into deep space, where he would spend the next several decades until some unfortunate souls rescued him. Even with 4 legions in the solar system, its defenses were not strong enough. Since the start of the war, enough time had passed for the galaxy to mobilize. Tens of billions of soldiers, thousands of titans, and hordes of unimaginable might were on their way to Terra, either to defend or siege the cradle of humanity. If such armies were to fight on a single planet, nothing but ruins would remain. In order to prevent this, Dawn decided to bleed out both sides outside the solar system. The Garmon cluster would serve as the location for that bloodletting. Located on the junction of several major stable warp paths, this fortress system was to face the largest battle of the Horus Heresy. Dawn gave orders to all Loyalist forces in the galaxy to muster there. Yet there was a second layer to Dawn's plan. The battle aimed to buy as much time as possible. There was no chance of victory. The only feasible achievement was stalling. With every passing day, Guilliman came closer. Leon burned another traitor planet, and Horus lost yet another part of his sanity. Leman Russ decided not to take part in a battle designed to be lost, but to throw himself into an insane operation that might yield a victory. Thus, he took it upon himself to defeat Horus before the Battle of Garmon Cluster could start. He told his soldiers of the dangers of the mission, and that they could remain on Terra, yet all elected to follow him to death. Russ took his legion towards his homeworld, Fenris, where he claimed further recruits, and steeled himself before his suicidal attack. Using the beacon planted on the Vengeful Spirit during the Battle of Molech, Russ located Horus in the Trisolian system. He mustered his entire legion in pursuit, which numbered 50,000 Space Marines, and a fleet that was barely able to travel through the Imperium after the damage sustained in the Alaxes Nebula. Against them stood the main traitor army, which consisted of the Sons of Horus, Word-Bearers, and Alpha Legion, with elements of the World Eaters, Iron Warriors, and Night Lords. In 012 M31, the Space Wolves arrived, shortly after the system had surrendered. Local Mechanicum leadership was assassinated, and cyborg defenders were mind-controlled by a new Dark Mechanicum overlord. The traitor fleet dispersed to solidify control on all planets in the system. This gave the Space Wolves an opportunity for a sudden charge directly upon the War Master. Even with this perfect opportunity, the only way to kill Horus was with a boarding action, as the Loyalist fleet was in a sorry state. Approaching between 3 stars, the Space Wolves made contact before the traitors could regroup. Their entire tactic was to isolate the Vengeful Spirit, while the grand majority of the Legion boarded it. Yet the Vengeful Spirit was no longer just a ship. It had become a chaos domain of Horus. Its insides grew, its corridors became a changing labyrinth, and Horus could not be found unless he willed it. The Space Wolves attacked relentlessly. Their attack penetrated deep, just as the War Master intended. Trapped inside, far away from the landing decks, the wolves became the prey. Horus dueled Leman. The War Master, with his new might, dominated Russ. In a last-ditch gamble, Leman sacrificed his arm, lung and heart for a single strike. His spear pierced deep into Horus's side, and the chaos corruption was forced out of his body. Leman knew his brother well. After being liberated of chaos, Horus would see the madness of his actions and abandon his course. But after Molech, only half of Horus's soul was in his body, set apart from the burning ambition that willingly gave itself to chaos. The War Master summoned back the unholy powers and counterattacked. Mauled and defeated, Leman was at death's door. As Horus tried to finish him, the Space Wolves flocked to their Primarch, with hundreds dying to stop Horus, and thousands more perishing as they evacuated Leman out of the Vengeful Spirit. Even outside the flagship, the fate of the Space Wolves was grim, for their fleet was about to be surrounded and destroyed. Luck, however, proved to be on their side when the Knights Errant blew up an ammunition depot on the Vengeful Spirit, enabling the Loyalists to regroup. Additionally, the young Mechanicum adept Belisarius Cawl killed the leader of the Trisolian Dark Mechanicum. It ended the mind control of all local forces, many of whom already were on board traitor ships. The Trisolian resistance bought precious time for the dying Space Wolves. Even with that much help, the Space Wolves barely managed to escape, losing more than 80% of their legion. Before falling into a coma, Leman Russ insisted that the operation was successful. Nevertheless, victorious or not, it was not the end of the struggle. The Space Wolves retreated into the Yarant system, and Abaddon chased after them. The Space Wolves had no chance of fighting back. Indeed, they would have all been utterly annihilated, if not for the intervention of the Raven Guard. Corvus Corax barely managed to evacuate his comatose brother, and escaped far away from Terra for Leman to heal undisturbed. While Abaddon was still occupied in Yarant, the injured War Master launched the offensive into the Garmon cluster. If the traitors could capture the planets Beta Garmon 2 and Beta Garmon 3, the Loyalists would be forced to retreat. Horus's arrival in this solar system was so swift that no Loyalist Primarch had arrived yet. Moreover, the local Imperial army was disorganized, with Mechanicum forces from different planets refusing to cooperate or share their secret technologies. While the Loyalists struggled to organize themselves, Horus conquered Beta Garmon 2. Taking the second main objective, Beta Garmon 3, would take months of siege, so the War Master decided to expand the battlefield. He launched an offensive on roughly 100 planets, moons and space stations all around the Garmon cluster. The size of the armies was gargantuan, so much so that hundreds of Titans fought on each side on even secondary battlefields, like the shipyards of Theta Garmon 5. When new Loyalist forces arrived upon this all-out war, they had nowhere to regroup before falling prey to a vigilant traitor fleet. On Beta Garmon 3, the opposing forces were locked in a stalemate when the Loyalists received intel that a new front was to be opened to the south. The defenders carved out a new unit under Princeps Escher Ani Mahana, sending all they could spare. In total, this force consisted of 50 Titans and 100 Knights. Additionally, they contacted a newly arrived fleet that would reinforce them on site after breaking through the space blockade. Unfortunately, the Armada was intercepted, and all soldiers aboard were implanted with Dark Mechanicum mind control chips. The ground forces observed as the promised reinforcements passed the blockade with practically no resistance. Mohana instantly understood that they were betrayed, and the incoming reinforcements were actually the traitor forces. Unleashing a barrage of surface-to-orbit fire, the Titans tried to scare off the fleet, but it was too late. The traitors retaliated with a bombardment before dropping 50,000 soldiers, manning artillery and tanks. The Titans were instantly surrounded and bombarded from above. The Loyalists charged towards the shore to escape encirclement. The Knights escaped along the coast, while the Titans went waist-deep into the water and fired upon the tanks with their flanks and backs now secured. The armoured forces spread wide into a single line along the beach and exchanged fire with the Titans. Even now, the traitors' firepower was superior, and the Titans were falling one by one. Mohanna ordered the knights to return. The reinforcements started swiftly obliterating the flanks. The Dark Mechanicum overlord struggled to reform, and as a consequence lost the entire army. With the ambush being unsuccessful, Beta Garmon III held until the arrival of forces from Terra. Before long, the Blood Angels and White Scars had arrived on the scene. Sanguinius assumed command and created order, while Jagatai struck at secondary battlefields, rapidly creating advantages and withdrawing before the traitors could respond. As the second year of the most bloody Battle of the Heresy started, Horus was on the back foot. Sanguinius was adamant about retaking Beta Garmon II. The fortress city Nirkon and the orbital defense station above it, known as the Anvil, had to be retaken. Both sides gathered 2,000 Titans on the planet and tens of thousands of Astartes to fight aboard the station. The scale of destruction on the surface was unheard of. Only one word is used to describe this battle: Titan death. In orbit, the Sons of Horus fought to the last man, more like territorial beasts than tactical soldiers. Eventually, after weeks of fighting, it was discovered that the Anvil had been rigged to fall onto the city. The Blood Angels barely escaped, but the same could not be said for the Titans below. The entire city and space station fell on the Titans, both traitors and loyalists, with almost none on either side surviving. The fortress planet was now in loyalist hands, but its defences lay completely in ruins. Beta Garmon III was left with a token garrison of 25 Titans, as severe acid rains covered the planet and corroded anything but the Titans in just a few days. However, Horus had spared 300 Titans in reserve and launched a successful counterattack on the planet. The positions of the two belligerents were now swapped. However, the traitors had more Titans left than the loyalists did, and their core planet still had many intact fortresses. Sanguinius called for a general retreat. The war for Garmon Cluster was lost. However, the traitors' cheers were cut short, as Horus's wound from the combat with Leman reopened, and the Warmaster fell into a coma. Would the traitor army be able to remain united with its leader out of commission? Or would a power vacuum destroy it from the inside? Find out in the next episode. Our series on the Warhammer 40k Horus Heresy will continue, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.